Today we're reviewing the Pipedream Sirius S5. Hey everybody, I've been excited for this hardtail for a long time. I'm so glad to be able to get my hands on one. This bike is unlike any other bike I've ridden. It's very different. And today I'll do my best to describe how it's different and what it rides like. This bike is 5 years ahead of its time. The world isn't quite ready for this bike yet. Some of you will be. Most people aren't ready yet. They've really just done some cutting edge stuff that nobody else is quite doing. They all talk about doing it, but Pipedream is one of the first to actually do it. So what are some of those things I'm talking about? They focus on sizing your bike by reach. They don't use small, medium, and large sizing names because people get trapped into those. They want you to look at the geo chart and pick the reach that makes the most sense for you. They have super short seat tubes so that you can fit on multiple frames. And then you just decide, do I want a longer bike or a shorter bike? And you'll still have enough dropper to use. And the geometry on this thing is so modern. It's too modern for some people. This thing has a really nice climbing position, really nice seated position. They've got a slack head angle, long reach, steep seat tube angle, all things that I love. Adjustable sliding dropouts, I'm so glad they went that route. Clearance up to a 2.6. Here on the rocks, the frame isn't as supple as a really soft steel bike like the Stanton Sherpa. And we're going to compare it to the Sherpa a lot today because on paper they look like they have similar intentions, but man, these two bikes could not ride differently. Kind of middle of the road for a steel bike as far as suppleness goes. Man, that climbing position is just wonderful. I love the seated position. This bike has a low stack and it kind of puts you in an attack position with a lower handlebar. And one thing that's interesting is the stack is the same for all sizes. And I think super tall people are gonna find the stacks lower than they want. This head angle is 65 degrees, but it feels closer to 63. Perhaps that's because we have less sag on a 120 mil fork, but on slower, flatter terrain like this, you can feel the slacker head angle. This is the bike that I've been waiting for a company to be bold enough to make. 65 degree head angle, 120 mil fork, lightweight, zippy, small, room for a huge dropper, sliding dropouts. It's pretty bold. And it seems weird to say that these days because there are a lot of slack hardtails, but they're all built around 150 forks or they're overbuilt. I've been saying for years now that a short travel hardtail with modern geometry is going to be so much fun. And today we get to put that to the test on this bike. And I really applaud Pipedream for being willing to be on the bleeding edge of geometry. I know on paper it doesn't sound that different. This bike is so different from any other bike I've ridden. It's almost like a trail version of the Hanzo ESD. Very slack, very confident in the chunk and the steeps, but light and zippy enough to be pedaled quickly. And that's pretty surprising because no one else is really doing anything like this. Take a look at how much seat post I've got sticking out. This is a 150 mil post. I'm 5'6". I could easily run a 175 in there, probably longer. Now I'm running a 35 mil rise bar because I wanted to combat that low stack. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad the stack's no lower because it's about at the limit of what I like, but it does force you into a more aggressive riding position where you're over the front and kind of leaning into stuff a little more and you're more in attack position than a high stack lazy boy feel. I'm 5'6". I have very short legs and a long torso, and this is the longish frame size. That's their smallest frame size. And they actually recommend someone 5'6" be on a long, which is kind of their medium size. So that should tell you something about their sizing. This has a 445 mil reach, and it's the smallest bike they make. All right, let's see how she does on this janky tech. Yeah, pretty easy to muscle it around if you're used to slack bikes. I will say, this bike takes a much more modern riding technique than any other bike I've ridden. Most riders are not going to be able to get the maximum out of this bike until they adapt their riding style. And what I mean by modern riding style, I've got a whole video about it. I mean not steering with the bars. If you steer with the handlebars on this bike, you're gonna hate it. It wants to be leaned and aggressively. You try and keep the stem as straight as possible. Man, this thing wants to charge. It's interesting, it could not be any more different than the Stanton Sherpa. This bike is a polar bear in sheep's clothing. It is so aggressive, but it works so well. Modern components have come so far, and a 120 mil fork today is so capable of being pushed hard. And this bike absolutely maximizes that. Forget you're on a 120 mil fork and you ride it like a 140, 150. So yeah, I'm riding a size smaller than they recommend. Didn't quite get that. I'm gonna go back and get that. All right, we got it. There's another big wall. It's not a harsh steel bike, but it's not ultimate plush like that Sherpa. And it encourages you to ride it a little more aggressively because it reacts so well to sharp, speedy bursts of power. Oh yeah, so good. What a good climber. This bike sprints extremely well. It spins really well. I love this modern Geo. In my bike consultation, I'm really careful to recommend modern Geo bikes to people who don't have trails that need them or who don't have the experience to ride them. A few of you have purchased modern aggressive bikes and you realize you don't have the terrain to push them hard enough. Man, this is so composed down here. The trail's pretty washed out from the flash floods we've had. I wish the stack were a little taller. I was worried about that. And when I was talking to Brian from Smith Creek Cycles, he said, oh no, don't worry about that. No one's had problems with the stack. On this super steep downhill stuff, I do wish that my bars were a little higher. I'm more front bias than I want. And even though this needs a front bias modern approach, it doesn't need quite this much. So I'd love a little bit taller stack. Still, this bike's incredible. And it's unlike any other bike I've ridden. This bike has taken 5 or 6 rides to really get used to. Rides so unique. Woo! Almost went down there, that was freaky. Sirius is the right name for this bike. It is a serious bike. This thing just wants to charge. It does not want to just sit and spin and be relaxed. Wow, that was pretty composed. I did get offline there because the track is so blown out right now. I was able to save it, but man, I was worried for a second. So yeah, this bike feels slacker than its numbers say it is. This thing is so zippy. This is not a beginner's bike. Like, to me, it's kind of like a Formula One car. If you don't really know what you're doing and just get on and pedal, sure, you can make circles and ride a trail. But if your technique's not on point, this bike, you're gonna be fighting it. If you have modern technique and you know how to really read the terrain and pump it and move your body around in corner without steering at the bars, oh man, you're in for a treat, because this thing is magical. But like I say, I think it's 5 years ahead of anything else, which means a lot of people aren't ready for it. But if you get used to this, you will be disappointed at so many other bikes after this. This bike sort of has a similar vibe as the BC Originals Podsole. Podsole's a little bit stiffer. This bike is a little more serious and just wants to charge on the downhills. Now, one thing I gotta say about this bike, they say it fits people down to 4'11", and I believe it. This bike feels way smaller than its numbers suggest. Usually when I review bikes, I pick a bike between 435 and 455 reach, and this is right in the middle at 445. Something about this bike feels a little bit compact. It's got a low bottom bracket, so you really feel in the bike, not on the bike. I think that low stack has something to do with it. This is the first 29er that I would recommend for someone 4'11" or 5 foot, with one big caveat. This is a long reach, and some bike companies believe bikes are not long enough. Others believe they're too long and should be shorter. If you subscribe to Lee McCormick's rad sizing, I do not, but if you do, this probably isn't the bike for you, because it's the exact opposite. This wouldn't be my first choice for a pump track bike. It's like a enduro rider's trail bike. It does not feel like a wimpy, lightweight, sketchy, breakable XC bike. It feels like an enduro bike that's lost some weight and gained some pep in its step, which is just what I like. It is slightly more aggressive than I'd want for my only hardtail, which is pretty wild to say. It does feel a tad small for me, and I'm curious, since they recommend a long, if a long would fit me better for my height and for my riding style. But I'm super curious to try one, because this just feels a tad short to me on really rowdy stuff. Yeah, the cockpit feels a little bit short. You do feel the slack head angle at slow speeds. It wanders a little bit more. And I don't think I will ever want a trail bike like this any slacker. In fact, for some people, I think putting in a +1 degree angle set will be the way to go on this bike. So for the past week and a half that I've been riding this, I've been wondering, would a long really suit me better like they recommend? And I can't get that thought out of my head. So I reached out to Brian at Smith Creek Cycle. I said, Brian, you're gonna hate me. I think I should have gone with a long like you guys recommended, but usually, you know, 464, 465 mil reach is longer than I'm used to. But I think I should have gone with that. And I have to give a huge shout out to him. He said, no problem. Let me send you a long, and you can compare them back to back and see which size you'd recommend to your viewers too. So yesterday, my long Pipedream Sirius showed up, and I'm gonna put all these parts on it and compare how it rides. This bike position is comfortable enough that I could bike pack in it. I'd want the front end a little higher, and it's a little slacker than I would want for bike packing. Sure, you could bike pack with it. And remember, I'm running this at the max travel at 120 mil. So if you were to put a rigid fork on this, or like a 100 mil fork, your head angle is going to be a little steeper. It'll work better at slower speeds. I wanted to build this thing up as a lightweight attack fighter jet, and that's what it is. So yeah, compared to the Sherpa, I think the Sherpa for me would make a better bike packing bike. A little bit shorter effective top tube, less steep head angle, more relaxed at just flatter rolling stuff like this. If I was taking it down a double black diamond, definitely the Sirius. And on that Sherpa where I crashed and broke my pinky, I don't think I would have crashed on this bike. I think I would have got that climb. This bike climbs better for me because it's a little slacker, a little bit longer. There's more room all over it. This is more like the all mountain enduro bikes that I'm used to riding most of the time. Man, this is a special bike though. Really, really fun, especially at higher speeds. If you know you don't ride at higher speeds, I don't think this is for you. But if you just pedal as hard as you can everywhere and ride everything as fast as possible, man, this bike really comes alive. You've got to be on your game though with body position. Man, just bumps right up these so good. You cannot get lazy. You cannot lean back. You cannot start turning with the bars and keeping the bike upright. It really reminds you to lock in the stem straight and lean the bike as much as possible. And most riders aren't used to that, and that's why I say this would not be a good first bike. You know, leaning the bike and keeping the bars straight is not a very natural way to ride. Most people that ride that way have taken clinics to teach them to do it because it didn't come naturally to them. I think 120 mil is perfect for this bike. It's kind of like a lower stack version of my Banshee Paradox. Similar ride feel, stiffness feel. It rides lighter than it is, but you won't mistake it for an XC bike. My spot rocker is noticeably lighter and snappier. This thing's slacker than the Yeti Arc with a slacker installed. It really feels like a little bit stiffer, a little bit lighter, a little bit zippier Hanzo ESD with a lower front end. I think if this bike were at a demo day, 99% of the people would not love it. But if it was all they rode for a month, they probably would not go back to anything else. Once you get used to this geometry, it is so addictive with how fast you can ride things, how much confidence you have. But truly, there's no other bike that rides like this. It's kind of in a category of its own. And I'm excited because I have a feeling we're going to be seeing a lot more bikes like this in the future. You don't need more than 130 mil travel, 120 mil travel, even on a hardcore hardtail. They just behave so well when the front does not dive hardly at all. And 120 is still a lot of travel, especially when your rear end has zero. So we're gonna pause right here. This review is fairly inconclusive because I feel like this is just a tad small for me, which is crazy to say. But big shout out to Brian at Smith Creek Cycles for being A, dealer of Pipedream in North America, and B, an awesome shop. There are fewer and fewer good shops these days. If you need a bike built up, a frame built up, if you're having a hard time finding parts, if you're wanting something exotic like a Pipedream, hit him up. He is a huge supporter of this channel. He went way out of his way to send me a size long, and that's what I'm gonna be doing now, is putting all these parts on the long and then finishing this review up so you can hear if that's better for me or worse for me, so you can be better informed about which size you should order. So I'll be right back when all these parts are swapped over. All right, I got all the parts swapped over to the long Sirius. Now we're gonna take it out on the trail so I can describe the difference between the two. I've had the long out on a few rides before I filmed this segment. It's definitely the better fit for me. I do feel that low stack. I'm used to bikes this long and aggressive, but they all have higher stacks, so this is different. Man, this bike is a charger. You're not gonna confuse it with an XC bike, but man, it charges downhill. But yeah, your technique really has to be on point, especially on the longer frame. That front wheel's really far out there in front of you. Oh, what a well-balanced machine though. Love this bike. It's fun. really fun. It's not Santa Cruz Chameleon fun where it feels like a dirt jumper with a dropper. Man, this thing climbs well. That lower stack really keeps the front end down. Yeah, it feels more like an enduro bike that you want to pedal all day. Like a short travel enduro. Lots of 2-foot ledges there. Man, it's composed. This Geo's great. I wish the stack were higher for my taste, but not every bike needs to be the way I want it to be. This puts you in a more attack position. It forces you over the front, forces you to weight that front a little more because the front's a little lower. This thing is just fine on the junk. Hello. Good morning. Oh, you can find a good spot for you. I'm in no rush. Can I sneak by you? Thanks, appreciate it. Just me. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you. Yeah, this thing wants to race downhill. But it doesn't feel like a pig when you're climbing. It's an energetic bike. Not quite as energetic as my Banshee Paradox. Pardon me. Oh, you're great right there. Thanks.
Yeah, man.
Have a great day.
You bet.
It's not quite as happy sprinting as my Spot Rocker. But man, what a great balanced all-rounder for people that like climbing. This one's a 2-footer undercut. Yeah, easy to maneuver around, and even on the long I've got plenty of seat tube. I wish I could run a 175 dropper. It would need to be about an inch shorter, but man, feels good. It doesn't feel huge. We've got a few more brutal climbs here. This is a test for any bike. I like the steeper seat angle. This is a truly modern geometry bike. All right, here we go. This is where slack head angle struggles a little bit. Oh, we got it. Yeah. That's a hard one. Good morning.
Morning.
Excuse me.
Get out of your way.
Oh, you're great. Have a good day. I only make this climb 1 out of 15 or 20 tries, but man, this thing climbs well. Today might be the day. Let's see if I can muscle through it. It's just continuous ledges. Hard to keep your momentum. Hard to pick a line. Two-foot lift there. Oh my goodness. Whew.
I thought you were going to walk it. Everyone does.
Thank you. Have a good day. Yeah, this thing is a phenomenal climber, especially on tech. On paper, this thing looks a lot like the Sherpa. They're both short travel. They're both slack. They're both chromoly. They're pretty close to the same weight. The Sherpa does feel a little lighter when riding it. But man, they could not ride more different. This is a downhill shred machine with low travel that also climbs extremely well. The Sherpa is a Sherpa. It's a comfortable all day in the saddle bike. It's more supple, more relaxed riding position. You don't need to be on your game so much. You can't ride quite as intense trails on the Sherpa as you can on this. The Sherpa I'd pick for over 3 hours, and this one I'd pick for under 3 hours with double black diamonds. Man, I'm so glad Brian was able to send me along. It completely made me click with this bike. The longish was good, but this is 40% better for how I ride. What a difference. What a special bike. It has so much special sauce in all the right places. Man, never known a bike to climb this well and descend this well and still be this playful. And I've never had a low stack bike that was so easy to get on the back wheel either. I'm running the chainstay slammed all the way forward for that playful short rear end. Oh, so good. What a bike. Such a charger. I've completely forgotten it's a 120 mil travel fork on here. So I have a lot to say about this bike. It's very different from anything out there. This bike is 3 to 5 years ahead of its time. Most people aren't ready for it, and most people won't like it unless they change their technique. And some coaches are going to tell you changing your technique is an awful idea, and some coaches are going to fully embrace it. I've embraced the longer, lower, slacker bikes. They really make riding come alive for me. But I know a lot of people that don't ride these very well, especially less experienced riders. If you haven't seen my video on how to ride modern bikes, go watch that. It applies 100% to this. You have got to weight the front when it's further out in front of you. Most people want to lean away from it and weight the back because that's comfortable. We lean away from the danger. But if you know how to ski or snowboard, or even when you're hiking, you lean downhill, not away from it, because then you slip out and slide. If you can learn to do that on a bike, you can really make these modern bikes come alive for you. My main business is online bike consultation. I help people make sure before they drop $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 on a bike that it's a good fit for them, their riding style, and their trails, especially hardtails. And I do that via Patreon. Patreon.com/hardtailparty is where you can sign up a month at a time to chat with me, pick my brain, ask me all sorts of questions about the hardtails I've ridden. How does bike A compare to bike B? I live here. What do you suggest? Should I get a longish or a long? I help all sorts of people with knowing what components to build their bike up, knowing what alternatives to get when they wanted bike A, but it's back ordered for 9 months. You know, what else would work well? I love helping people, and that's my main job. So if you're interested in that and you want to avoid making a costly mistake buying a bike sight unseen without talking to someone who's ridden it, sign up, become a patron. Once you've got the advice you need, feel free to cancel at any time. There's no obligation to stay subscribed. But that's how I'm able to make more of these videos more often. It's slack. People are going to buy this thinking, oh, it'll be a great bike packing bike or an XC race bike. It's not. It's not an XC race bike. It doesn't ride like one at all. It rides like an enduro bike that's light with short travel, just like I like. It's a fantastic rowdy trail bike that's up for anything. I could take this on any trail in the US and have fun on it. I love the sliding dropouts. I love the Geo, except for that short stack. I was a little worried about the stack being short because I love a huge stack. Everyone's different though, and I think a lot of riders are gonna prefer this over the tall stack that I like. The low stack has benefits. It helps you dive into corners more. It helps you naturally weight the front end so you don't have to think about as much, so it won't wash quite as much. It helps you on steep climbs. The front end stays down, it doesn't want to wheelie. But where I feel it's a detriment is on flatter sections or long gradual climbs. I just feel a little hunched over. Now this has a super long reach for someone 5'6", which I love. But if you look at like a nuke-proof Scout, this is gonna be in a large or XL range with the reach, and I'm 5'6". It just goes to show how every bike company approaches sizing and bike fit and geometry and performance differently. Personally, I'm a huge fan of what Pipedream's doing. I think this is where hardtails are gonna be in 3 to 5 to 10 years, once riders adapt to them and learn how to ride them better, but the world's not ready for this thing. I think about 10% of the riders out there can make this thing dance and will love it. The other 90% think they will, and they want something rowdy and something aggressive, but they don't have the skills to back it up. And that's not a dig. And I shouldn't even say they don't have the skills to back it up. Their riding position suits other bikes. And there are bike riders who are much better than I am who would not like this geometry, who would prefer the more old school Geo. But everyone's different. There's no right or wrong. Our trails are different. We ride them differently. We ride for different reasons. Some people like to play as much as possible. Other people like to shred downhill as much as possible. I love that you could set it up single speed. It would be an aggressive single speed. People who have a more traditional riding style, who steer on top of the bike, who are more relaxed and just kind of in a neutral position all the time, are gonna find the front end floppy. I didn't find it floppy at all, except for really tight switchbacks, but I will take the slack head angle everywhere else. So I wouldn't change the head angle one bit. And I hope this video re-emphasizes the importance of bike sizing. I'm in between the sizes. I could go with the long or the longish. I much prefer the long. The longish felt a little more skittish. I didn't quite click with it. I couldn't quite push it as hard. It still had the same attitude about it, but I couldn't make it work for me nearly as well as I can with the long. Does that mean you should size up to a bigger size? I don't know. It depends on your riding style. If you have been riding for years, if you have steep terrain where you are more on the front wheel than the back, and that's especially true on a hardtail, the suspension's doing all the work. So weighting the back just makes this not do as much work, and then you're taking more vibrations through the back anyway. I'll do some more videos on hardtail technique coming up. I know that a lot of you guys want that. But if your technique can do it, and if you've taken lessons, you know how to corner with your feet, you know how to corner with leaning the bike and keeping the bars almost perfectly straight, you know how to really shift your weight around over the front and over the back. I love the Pipedream Sirius. This is such a radical bike, and I would happily have one of these in my stable. This would be my go-to bike where my friends are like, let's go ride, and I don't know what we're gonna ride. It's down for anything, except very long days in the saddle for me. But man, what a special bike. Pipedream, you knocked it out of the park. And I need to give another huge shout out to Brian at Smith Creek Cycles. He made this review possible, not with just one, but 2 frames. And he believes in the channel, he believes in hardtails, and he believes that you guys deserve to know what the awesome Sirius is all about. And so he made it possible. Thank you, Brian. If you're in North America and you're looking for a Pipedream, hit him up, tell him you're a fan of Hardtail Party, and see what he's got available in sizing and colors and all of that. Let's rate this bike. Climbing, technical stuff, 10 out of 10. Mellow fire road climbing, 7 out of 10 with that low stack. Playfulness, I'm actually really surprised at how playful this is. It manuals, it jumps, it bunny hops extremely well. It doesn't feel like a super long just shredder. It has an amazing balance of shredding, but still being playful, and I absolutely love that. That's a really hard balance to find. This is more playful than my Banshee Paradox. It's on par with my prototype titanium bike, although that has a higher stack. So just a different feel on that. Cornering, I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10, maybe an 8 out of 10 for almost falling over greater than 90-degree switchback turns. People are gonna struggle with that unless you're used to slack head angles. If you've had more than 3 or 4 bikes with a 65-degree head angle or slacker, you're gonna fit this bike well. If you're coming from a 67-degree head angle, you're really gonna struggle with this for a while, and you may never click with it. Or who knows, you may click with it right away and just say, oh, that's the secret sauce I've been missing. This bike oozes secret sauce. It's beautifully constructed. It's pretty lightweight, but I'm sure it can take a pounding. It's not the most supple, but it's not stiff either. What a great all-rounder. Pipedream, you knocked it out of the park. Now I'm really curious to try the Moxie, though I feel like the Sirius is more my style. Super rowdy, super aggressive, lightweight, quick, snappy, with awesome geo, with a short travel that just wants to charge. I never once felt let down by this fork. I feel like 120 mil is plenty. And I know people like big stiff forks like 36s and 38s, but when you only have 120 mil, you've got more bushing overlap, you've got less stanchion exposed, there's less flex there. The more travel you get, the more you're asking of your fork, and that's when you start needing stiffer stuff. So for me, a 34 or a Sid or a Pike is absolutely plenty for a bike like this. This Pipedream Sirius is such a good bike. It's very special, and it's carved out a corner of its market that no other bike I've ridden can quite do. It is a raw, fast, fun, exciting, energetic, shreddy, rowdy hardtail. And this is what I've been saying for years we've needed to see, is something around short travel with slack angles that still climbs well. And man, they knocked it out of the park. Such a fun bike. Thanks to Pipedream for thinking outside the box and pushing the envelope of what's possible on a hardtail. I loved it. Thanks to Brian from Smith Creek Cycles for making this review possible. And thanks to all of you who love hardtails as much as I do. There's a party in the mountains and you're invited.